Hey sunflowers, it's been a minute. Today I'll be showing you how to make the slouchy hat. Yes, these were a combo of a cowl, a mask and the hat. However, today I'll just be focusing on the hat. Let's get into it. Okay, just to get into it then, firstly I'll be sharing the equipment that you need for the hat. The first one is this pure gold yarn that I use. It's a double knit. If you look at the back, they usually share the size needles that you need to use for whatever project you'll be making with this yarn. So if you're crocheting, they recommend a 4mm crocheting hook, and if you are knitting, they suggest between 3.25 and 4mm knitting needles. So this color is not indicated anywhere on the wool. I just called it a rustic orange. It was very popular. It was actually the very first color that I used for my winter hat and cowls. It was very popular, but then it was quickly taken over by the red color. Very stunning color. And so versus what the wool has suggested, I am using totally different needles. I am using two for that matter. I'm using a 3.5 as well as a 5mm needle. So the reason I'm using a 3.5, this is for the band of the hat. I've found that the 3.5 just makes it tighter. The band just sits more snug around your forehead. And the 5mm, if you've been on my Instagram page, you will realize that the hat is not meant to sit tightly around the head. So the 5mm helps with the effect of the hat almost falling off your head, because it's not meant to be tight, like I said. And then we also need the tapestry needle just to sew in your ends, to weave in your ends, as well as scissors just to cut off your yarn as you're working, as and when. So I'll go ahead and get these out of the way. Take off the tag around the wool and pull out the yarn. So for this project, I'll be using 4 types of stitches. The first one is a chain stitch, then a single crochet, a puff stitch, as well as a slip stitch. So we need to pull just enough yarn from the ball so that your work does not get too tight, because if you work with too narrow yarn from the ball, it actually makes the work tighter. So what I've just done now is your slip knot. I will be doing a series of videos for absolute beginners at a much slower rate to show how each of these stitches are done. So I'll just be focusing on the basic crochet stitches. So that should really help anybody that's an absolute beginner on how we actually crochet. So what I've just done now is the slip knot, and I will go ahead and do my foundation chain, which consists of 9 chains. Now the number of chains that you make will determine how wide or narrow you want your band to be. Mine is more on the narrow side, simply just because that's just the look I liked. And then we get to the 9th chain. We skip that first chain that we made, and we work into the 2nd chain. So you insert your hook in the 2nd chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Insert your hook, pull through, yarn over, pull through. And you do that until the end of your foundation chain, and this row counts as the first row for this project. As you're working, it just always helps to count, just to make sure that you're not missing any stitches or making additional stitches at your work. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's the correct number. When you get to the end, you chain 1 and you turn your work. So to get that ribbed effect of the band, we will only be working on the back loop of the work that we've done. So the back loop, if you see that V there, that V, you go to the back side of the stitch, which is called the back loop. You pull through, yarn over, pull through. Insert your hook on the back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through. And you do that until the end of your work. And this row counts as your second row. So on the second row, you do that for the first 7 stitches. What I then do on the last stitch, the 8th stitch, instead of going only to the back post, I go through both the chains, because I've just found that it just gives you a neater finish. You can go, continue and make all 9 stitches on the back loop, but I'm just sharing honestly what just worked for me. And like I said, you chain 1 and you turn your work. So I'll just show you the third row. Back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through. And on the last stitch, like I said, you go through both loops, pull through, chain 1. Now for the average adult head size, I've made a total of 46 rows. So you can go ahead and work your band up to 46 rows, and we will meet again when we get there, and I will share the rest, the next step to our hat. So this is how the band looks when you've come to the end of your work, and it's actually a total of 84 rows and not 46 for the average adult size. And these 84 rows give you an average of about about 40 centimeters for the average adult head. But I would suggest that you also put it around your head, just to see that it's not too tight, but it really should not be loose either. It's actually better tighter than loose, because it does lose some stretch over time. So what we're going to do now is to work the 2 ends of the band together. I prefer to work from the right to the left. It's just easier that way, and we're going to be doing a slip stitch. Just align the 2 ends and make sure that it's as equal as possible, and you pull through the band. You insert your hook into the next stitch, but you only put it through the front loop of the other side. You pull through and slip stitch. Do the same on the next stitch. Pull through, slip stitch. And that is how it should look. But that's going to be the inner side of your band. Okay. So we have this end from when we started working. What we're going to do, using the same 3.5 millimeter needle, we're going to do a single crochet right around the band. And that will form the base for our puff stitches. Okay. So when you single crochet, you're going to work in the middle, the space between the two raised part of your work and the middle. So this part here at the top will count for one stitch. The one in the middle will count for another stitch. So I've already done one stitch here on the middle. Okay, let me just correct that because it looks like it's a bit loose. So this first stitch, okay, let's just do it here. This will count as a single crochet on the raised part, the first stitch. It is a bit awkward, but don't worry about it. At the end, it will look fine. And you go to this part here, and you do a single crochet. Let's do that again. So you do a single crochet into the raised part of your work. That's your first single crochet. And the next single crochet is on the space between the two raised parts of your work. That's the next single crochet. So the third one is on the raised, and the one is in the middle. On the raised and in the middle. On the raised, it's just next to the highest point, and you go into the next space, which is in the middle. And as you're working, like I said, you work in the tail so that you don't have to weave it in at the end. And you do that right round your band. So I will continue, and we will meet again when we get to the end of the band. So we've come to the end of our round, and to finish off this round we're going to slip stitch into the first stitch the first single crochet. It's a bit tight. Pull it through and you pull through this row, and that's our slip stitch. At this stage we're going to flip our work to start with our first puff stitch row. Okay, so this row will count as the first puff stitch. Now how we go about it, you yarn over insert your hook in both the loops, the first chain, pull through your first loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain, pull through your second loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain again, and pull up your third loop. So in total on the chain you should have 7 loops. You can count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you yarn over and pull through all 7 loops. It can be a bit tricky. Pull through all 7 loops and chain 1. Okay? Then you skip this stitch and you go and work on the next stitch. So you yarn over, insert your hook in that stitch, pull through the first loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch, pull through your second loop, yarn over, insert your needle into the same stitch, pull through your third loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yarn over, pull through all 7 hoops, and then chain 1. You skip this chain. Let's do it a third time. Yarn over. Don't forget to yarn over first. Insert your hook into that stitch, pull through your first loop, yarn over, insert your hook, pull through your second loop, yarn over, insert your hook, pull through your third loop. That's when you have 7 stitches, yarn over. So this yarn over becomes almost like an 8th loop, and you pull that through and you chain 1. Okay, so one more time, yarn over, skip this 1 stitch, go into the next stitch, insert your hook, pull through your first loop, yarn over, insert your hook, pull up your second loop, yarn over, insert the hook, pull up your third loop, yarn over, that's your 8th hoop. So you also need to try and just make them not too tight, so that this your last yarn over is able to pull through all the hoops. But if you find that it's tight, as I have done it now, it's not coming through, don't be scared to start over. Just pull all the work out. It won't pull through the rest of the work. It will be stuck on the stitch just before the one that you're redoing. So you yarn over, insert your hook, pull through your first loop, yarn over, insert your hook, pull through your second loop, yarn over, insert your hook, pull through your third loop, yarn over, and pull through all 7 loops and chain 1. So we do that all the way around our band, and I will continue to do that, and we will meet again at the end of this row. So we're almost at the end, and we're just working up to the end of our first row. So this first row, as I've mentioned, I'm not sure if I mentioned it now, but it's worth repeating that I have the first row, the first puff stitch row, I use the 3.5 millimeter hook, and because this forms part of the band that needs to sit a bit tighter than the rest of the hat around your forehead. So we're working to the end, and up till the last stitch of this row we use the same needle. The last stitch of the row will sit into the first single crochet that we made. I hope you can see this properly. So that was the first single crochet, and we did a first puff stitch. So you put your needle into that space there. I hope you can make it out. And you pull through your first loop, second loop, third loop. I know it looks strange here, but don't worry, it will work out in the end. At this stage, I change my hooks, and I then use my 5mm hook. So the second row of the puff stitch is even easier than the first, because you're only working on the spaces between the puff stitch. So the first one, you go into the first page, yarn over, go into the first space, pull through your first loop, second loop, third loop, yarn over, pull through all, and chain one. Like I said, you're just working on those spaces. 2, 3, pull through all, chain one. This is the fun part. Just those big spaces. 2, 3, pull through all, chain one. As we come to the end of our row, 2, 3, I will show you how you get on to the third row of our puff stitch rows. So this would be the last stitch. So you just continue. So at this stage you would need to slip stitch to get onto the next row, but we're not going to do that. We're just gonna continue as we've been working into the next stage, into the next space, onto our third row. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and you just continue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in that fashion until you have worked up you continue in that fashion, gracious, 2, 3, until you work up 33 rows. So as you can see, this was a climb onto the third row. So the first row we use the 3.5mm hook, and when we get to where our work joins, you then move to the 5mm hook. You don't slip stitch anywhere. You just work up without slip stitching. And now we're just gonna work, as I've just mentioned, all the way up, and you count up to 23 rows. So I will also continue in that fashion, and we will meet again on the 23rd row, where I will be showing you how to join the top of the hat. And we've come to the end of our 23rd row, and this is what it would look like. And this is the opening now that we're going to be working on to try and close. Okay, so for our closing, we go back to our 3.5 millimeter hook. So what you do, you turn your work up. So having halved it, so you target the puff stitch directly opposite where your work has ended. You hook the needle around that post, okay, that puff stitch. Make sure it's at the top, and you pull it through. You have 2 stitches there, and you do a slip stitch. Okay. And you turn your work again. So now you'll have two equal halves, right? And you do the same thing on the side. You target the puff stitch directly opposite, center to the opposite side. Okay, I pulled my wool there. I'll have to just correct that. So you insert your hook right around that puff stitch, and you pull your yarn through, and you slip stitch into the loop on the hook. You turn your work again, and you make a half, you half your work, and you target the puff stitch directly opposite where your needle is, center, hook that stitch, and then pull your yarn through. I really hope this makes sense. It's easier to show it than explain it. And then you do a slip stitch. So now you have 4 equal parts, and you do the same thing. We're then gonna I usually make it about 60 centimeters plus minus, and I then cut the yarn. Okay, and then before I take it off the actual needle, you do your last slip stitch, and you pull through the entire strand of yarn, and you tighten it. And then at this stage, I want to then bring through the tapestry needle to close our top even further. So this is what our hat looks like now. So where we are, what I do is weave through the back of, so you make sure that you're working on the puff stitch closest to the end of your work. You might miss it at one or two spots, but you just make sure that you're working on the puff stitch closest to the end of your work. And what you do, you insert your needle at the back of the first puff stitch and at the top of the next. The back of the next one and the top one of the next one. So you alternate like that. So you do that until you get all the way around. And when you get to the last of the puff stitch that you went under, you pull your thread, pull your yarn, and this is what it should look like. And then after that, you basically just keeping to as close to center as possible. You continue weaving. I usually do about, make sure you pull your yarn to tighten it as close to center as possible. I think that's the best way to explain this part. You just weave in the center even closer. So trying to stay as close to center as possible. Pull your yarn. This helps just to secure the top so that it doesn't. Okay. Then after the third pull, that's what the top should look like. And just to make it even more secure, I usually just weave in to the inside of the hat and out again. About 5 times. And then just work the needle back just to do the final knot before I cut the needle off. And then I cut off the end on the inside of the hat. And that, my sunflowers, is how I make the hats. It's very beautiful and soft. And I've made many colors of these hats, and they were very popular this past winter. And we've come to the end of our video. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and for the next one I will be making the cowl that goes with this hat. And can't wait to see you then. Stay a blessing and be blessed. Ciao, ciao.